serious? Teachers of Reddit, what is the most disturbing thing your student has ever done? I used to teach a PE class to 3-5 year olds. I had this one kid who used to come with his friend from kinder. His friend's mother apologized to me numerous times and said she never would have offered to bring him if she knew what he was like. More than once I had to evacuate the rest of the kids from the gym because this 3-year-old would be running around the gym screaming "Foo, I can see you at the top of his lungs while trying to punch, kick or headbutt other kids. You never knew what would set him off. If you asked him to kick a ball, he was equally likely to kick another student or the ball. One time he went so violent that I couldn't get him away from the other kids and ended up wrapping him up in the firm cuddle technique, which they definitely don't teach teachers about anymore. I basically dropped him to his knees with me on my knees behind him, arms wrapped around his arms and his chest. The only part he could move was his head, and he kept trying to smash the back of his head into my face. But the worst part was the laughter. He normally had a vague, empty look on his face, but when he was trying to hurt someone he would scream with laughter, wearing the biggest eating grin. I only had him for 10 sessions once a week, but holy duck, I will never forget that kid. Back when I was a teacher, one of my students randomly started punching another kid, his friend, in the middle of class. No provocation whatsoever. The puncher was into bodybuilding and pretty in shape, and he had never been violent before in school, so this was both surprising and hard to break up considering his size. He broke his friend's nose and was smiling after. Had no idea what he did was weird or upsetting. I had a 5th grade student pick up 2 brick-sized rocks and try and stone another kid to death. I was a preschool teacher at the time. I was doing group time, singing songs, reading a book, and all the kids were sitting on the floor. One left to blow her nose. She came back, walked through the crowd of kids to get back to her spot, grabbed a quiet girl's hair, and kept walking. My assistant thought it was a mistake, but the girl kept walking. She even bent at the knees and yanked while the poor long-haired girl screamed. That girl had no remorse and would be so unpredictable. She would look in your eyes, but right through them. It was a stressful year. I taught 3rd graders for a year, so the kids were around 9 years old. It was a couple of days before summer holidays and I asked the kids what they were going to do during summer. I got to this one girl and asked her what she was going to do, and she happily announced she was going to Germany with her sister and parents. I asked her what she was going to do in Germany and she said she was going to ask people if they have €1. I was like, what? And she proceeded to sit down on the floor with a really sad look on her face, stuck her hand out to me and said, "See, like this. Please miss. Do you have just €1? I'm hungry." She didn't really see anything wrong with this. I'm pretty sure she didn't really understand what she was doing. I was quite alarmed by this, so I informed the other school staff. It turned out that even though they weren't actually poor, her parents were regularly taking their 2 daughters to Germany over summer, where they would make them beg for money in the streets. I heard the girl and her sister got pulled out of school shortly after that, but I don't know what happened after since I don't work there anymore. Tried to jump out of a 3rd floor window just because. I was utterly terrified. Recently had one of my students tell a pregnant teacher that he wanted to punch her in the stomach. Another student said, "You can't do that. She's pregnant." The first student then said, "That's the point. These are 5th graders. This is also in a school that rarely has behavior problems." So this was quite a shock. Crushed a bird in his fist. Middle school English teacher. I had a student pull a tooth out of his own head to get out of silent reading. It was a baby tooth, thank God, but according to mom it was not loose. He just sat at his desk and grabbed it and yanked it back and forth and popped it out and came up to the desk bleeding all over himself and said he wasn't able to read anymore, so could he just put his head down. He was sent to the nurse and mom was horrified. I had a girl who couldn't be in the classroom and had to be on a one-on-one with me at all times. But she couldn't be in the classroom because she was extremely violent and deliberately stabbed another child in the eye with a colored pencil, then laughed about it. The other child had to be hospitalized. When we asked her why she did it, she started laughing again and said because I wanted to. She would also randomly attack kids on the playground and in the halls. When they put her on a one-on-one with me and she couldn't do that anymore, she started attacking me on a daily basis. She was 4. At the first school that I taught at, I had a girl come up to me one day and say, "Robert has a knife." I pulled Robert into the hallway to talk with him about it. He said that he didn't have a knife, but did have a box cutter. I asked him why he had it and he said, "Because I'm tired of Chris." Chris was an annoying suck up but wasn't really bad or mean to other kids. I asked Robert what he was planning on doing to Chris. He said, "I am going to get him in the bathroom." I usually took the class to the restroom after lunch, but I didn't that day because they were being rowdy in the hallway. I took Robert to the office and after hearing the story, the principal chewed him out. She then called Robert's mom and she chewed him out on the phone. Here's the kicker. Robert knew that he was in serious trouble. He knew that what he was planning was wrong. He just didn't care. Not in a false bravado macho type was. He literally didn't care. I hate to predict a kid's future criminal endeavors, but that kid scares me. By the way, Robert was 8 years old at the time. I used to teach at an alternative high school, so a lot of my students were kids on probation. Kids from areas with a lot of gang violence. Many of them had issues related to the fact that they were born drug addicted. That kind of thing. I had a student who I had worked hard with to build a good rapport. One Friday, he looked me in the eyes and told me, completely calmly, that I shouldn't come to work on Monday. He kept telling me that he didn't want me to be there Monday. When I finally pressed him for why I should not come to work Monday, he told me that he was going to blow it up. I said, "You know I need to report this, right?" He told me to do what I had to do. He was arrested right out of my classroom and I had to be interviewed by the police. It was honestly really traumatic. I ended up calling out Monday, even though I knew nothing was going to happen because my anxiety went through the roof. I called out a lot after that and found a new job shortly after. But I still have a great deal of compassion for that student. I think about him often. I hope he's okay. I caught some kid trying to take inappropriate photos of his lady friends in the class. When I noticed him doing something fishy, he was directly aiming the camera to where the female students were sitting. I told him to hand over the phone and he got visibly uncomfortable but complied. I handed it over to his form tutor, who was a lady, and explained the situation. I figured if there were any photos of female students it wouldn't be okay for me to see it. First sweep through his documents didn't reveal anything, but luckily I thought of suggesting her to check the hidden category and I'm told everything was in there. School took disciplinary action as a result. I had a 5th grader who I swore was sociopathic. His father had deported the boy's mother because he wanted a new wife. If that gives some context to the living situation. The boy would say very aggressive asexual things, moon students on the bus, etc. But the predatory behavior was the worst. He'd wait till students left the room so he could be next to last, turn off the light and backhand the last kid in line, often his own cousin who was his most common victim. I had to keep an eye on him constantly. He'd also steal electronics and things from his friends, or force his cousin to do so in case they were caught. P.S. Yes, CPS was involved. This was almost a decade ago, so I'm not sure what happened to him. Today a 6-year-old boy in my class threatened to kill me just because I took his toy car out of his hand after asking him multiple times to put it away. He also trashed my desk looking for it, but luckily it was in my pocket. Taught preschool for a couple years. Had a 3-year-old in my class who was new to the school. He was cute as a button. The perfect blonde hair and bright blue eyes with rosy red cheeks. He was a nightmare. He used to just randomly get up and run around the room smacking other kids in the face. He got up one time to come over and punch me and my co-teacher in the stomach. I was able to stop him and put him in a hold that they taught us at my preschool. His parents acted like nothing was wrong. They refused to see that their child had serious issues. The final straw was one day during crafts. He was playing at a different center in the classroom and got up and ran towards a little girl I was helping. She had her back turned to him and he grabbed a triangle-shaped building magnet and stabbed her in the neck so hard it cut her. I have never reacted so quickly. I grabbed him up from behind by his arms and immediately walked him to the hallway and down to the main office. I was done. I told my director that he was either out of my class today or I quit. His parents withdrew him that day before we could start the process of expulsion. But my director still got him on some list that basically stays on his school record that he's had these outbursts. IDK what happened to him, but I'm sure I'll see him on the news someday. I always mention this one because it was literally my first day teaching ever, but a kid in my class carved a girl's name into his leg and bled everywhere. That same class a month later I had a kid steal my wallet and then later come give it back to me when I was alone in a hall after school. When he gave it back to me, he calmly told me I should be aware of what he could do to me since he was able to easily steal from me without me noticing. I actually never reported him for that, but soon after his parents pulled him out of our school because they thought we were too liberal and filling their godly son with bad ideas, so yeah. Had a student bite a girl in class and then get upset and argumentative when I sent him to the dean and gave him detention. He kept insisting it was a joke and she was his friend, but he literally broke skin. I sent her to the nurse. The dean came to me later and was like, he bit her? What the duck? In that same school, had another kid pull down his pants and flash some girls. Another student steal a girl's phone and destroy the SIM card so he could sell it. Multiple kids steal snacks that I had brought in for an experiment. And a girl loudly tell me in class that she would accuse me of sexual harassment because I wouldn't let her go to the bathroom in class after she routinely spent 30+ minutes every day out of my class wandering around and was explicitly banned from going to the bathroom in my class by administration. I'm glad to not be working in that hole anymore. More like what they said. I worked on a placement in a primary school back when I was in college, gaining experience for free, and one of the pupils asked me for colored paper out of this tray. One of the rules of the class was that they could only use plain paper and had to use both sides of it before they might be able to get another piece. So after I said she wouldn't be allowed to, she gave me an angry look and told me to wait around after the school was out so she could get her dad to beat me up. Shame, because she was a nice girl. Made a ninja star out of 2 pieces of printer paper and chucked it at my face. That thing was solid and sharp. Silver lining. The scar it left is perfect placement for a bindi. Third eye. I was a teaching assistant for an EBD school. Had one of the students try to stab me in the throat with a knife repeatedly during class. No one gave it, so I quit and moved on. Kid cranking his shaft in the middle of a state test that is a graduation requirement. The fact that younger students don't understand concepts, only facts. For example, when I was in my kindergarten class, one of the toys was a doctor's kit, so I let the little doctors use the blood pressure cuff on me. One day one of my kids says oh while using it, and I ask him, doctor, can you make me better? He says no, and I ask him why, and he responds, well, you are going to die one day. Having a 6-year-old telling you about your own mortality is very, very disturbing. At an adult learning college, the student was getting paid by their employer to come to college and get their formal qualification. Their employer was upset that after 12 months, this guy hadn't passed any of their subjects. They complained to the college that there seemed to be a mistake. The first I knew of it was admin staff asking why he had failed so many classes. I didn't know who he was, as he hadn't ever turned up or submitted any work over the 12 months. That's the first time I've been asked to show evidence of non-attendance. Apparently that's a thing. Pardon my English in advance. It's not my first language. I started teaching 2nd grade a few years ago. 7-year-old kids, and one of the students had a very complex personality. He was smaller than the other kids and he showed a lack of empathy. I never saw him have any joy of connecting to other people, unless he benefited of it in that moment in some way. He was a bit less developed mentally. I especially remember this one time the class worked with maths individually. The room was completely silent and everyone was focused. I was helping a kid when I suddenly see him standing up and walking over to another kid, who was always nice to everyone. Took his ruler, started at him and broke it in half and smiled. Then he walked back to his own seat while the other kid started crying silently. He sat down and was still smiling. It seems like such a small thing, but I remember this was when I realized how severe his case was. Back when I was a student aide, I had a 2nd grader come up to me with a pencil in his hand. This is how the ensuing conversation went. Mr. Bicep 46. Guess what this is? Oh, is it a pencil? No, it's a flesh ripper. This is how I rip off all of your flesh. And then he proceeded to walk away smiling. The same kid showed me his Chucky doll and told me that he likes the way it kills people. The kid's remarks were messed up. But what disturbed me more was that, when I told his classroom teacher, she was like, yeah, that's Johnny for you, and did nothing about it. On a lighter note, I had a kid rip the biggest ass flapper in the middle of a super quiet test. I had to tie my shoe behind the desk to try and keep composure. My grade 1 students were hanging out at the end of the day and sitting around playing Never Have I Ever. It was cute. They made signs that said yes and no on each side and were taking turns asking. Most of them were saying stuff like, never have I ever lied to my mom, or never have I ever been mean to my sister, or never have I ever eaten dessert before dinner, that kind of thing. Innocent as you would expect and hope year 1s to be. Then I had this boy, who came from quite a broken home and who I had serious concerns about, say never have I ever killed a cat, and then flipped up his yes sign. So creepy. Few years back I taught 2nd grade. An 8-year-old boy would always bring little treats for me in the morning like candy, a cookie, or even these tiny animal toys. This one morning he came to my desk and told me he had a gift for me. He opened his bag and pulled out a big brassiere and gave it to me. I was speechless, took it and put it in a drawer and just said thank you. Called in his mom and told her about this. Kids never gave me gifts again. I was never an actual teacher, but I was a camp counselor over a summer. We were going on a long hike and the kids were encouraged to drink lots of water. Because of this, many kids would have to go to the bathroom. By the time we got back to camp, all the kids really had to go. We only had one porta potty, so all the kids had to wait their turns. Well, at the camp we had these 2 brothers. So, when nobody was looking, they went inside together. 5 minutes later the whole porta potty tips over and they are literally covered in crap. From what I hear, they were fighting over who would go first. I'm a teacher at a language course. One student in particular is very challenging. He took his pants off twice, once in my co-worker class, once in my class. Both happened right after we yelled at him for being disruptive. Then it escalated. I was writing something on the board and the boys were giggling and laughing. I thought they were being silly as usual, but when I turned to face them, one of the boys told me that the challenging boy flashed them his D. 2 weeks later he was running to the classroom, stopped in front of my manager and headbutted her breast. On the same day, he also planted his face on our janitor's boobs when she was trying to break up their fight. We have told his mom about this and she said she would talk to him about the flashing incident but not the headbutting, as she was sure he did not mean to do it. Student created a booba trap like card for another teacher's birthday that, when opened, shot out sharpened, unfolded paper clips. I was stunned by how ingenious of an invention it was. Probably tell me without emotion about the countless people they had killed. Child soldiers. A lot of them were blasted on a pretty ducked up mix of gunpowder, sugar and amphetamines. Turns them into robots. Let's see. There was a student who told me he was gonna call his boys to take care of me. There was a student who grabbed another student's hood, pull it over his head and then try stabbing him in the neck with a plastic fork. Same student also raped a girl at a party. I had a student stab and kill another student in a fight 2 blocks away from the school. Had a student who masturbated in the piano practice room and would jizz between the piano and the wall. Had one student who used a baseball bat to attack a couple of women. Had a student try to kill himself in school by diving headfirst from the top of the stairs. Had a student who broke both of his fists punching another student in the face. A kid tried to hold the classroom hostage by pulling a box cutter, immediately started making crazy demands. Before security could even arrive, a big kid pushed him down, grabbed the box cutter right out of his hands and said, "Quit being an asshole." Then sat right back down for the lesson to continue. Edit. Thank you so much for the gold, kind stranger. If I knew where the big kid went on to after middle school, I'd share it with him. I'm the head coach at a high school, so close enough. We had a travel meet one weekend. I left work early and drove the 4 hours to the hotel. Everyone seemed to be a-okay, having a great time, and it all went smoothly. Well, there's always something, but all in all it was a good weekend. Next year comes and I've started to figure out that one of my student athletes has some home issues which they hide from with drugs, mainly weed, but I suspect there's some heroin and other hard stuff going on, and alcohol. Throughout the season I do my best to talk to them, to be there for them, and to try and guide them away from drugs and alcohol. It's going well. They're telling me that they've stopped drinking and smoking completely and they seem to be in a much better mood. Their mother has to go back into rehab, alcohol, leaves early, and goes back in again, but they seem to be handling it well enough until one day I show up to a team dinner and they seem a bit off. I talked to them and found out that they smoked a ton of weed before showing up. I also find out that at the travel meet the previous year they'd tried to kill themselves by downing a bottle of Tylenol. I started talking to their friend about working with me by being supportive and just being there for them. That friend starts to tell me more and more about how the student athlete has started to have crying breakdowns during their club, non-school, practice, and that's kind of where it's at right now. It's really disturbing for me because I spent so much time working with them, being there for them, supporting them, and just doing everything I possibly can do to help them be the best that they can be. However, they're still winding down this dangerous path that, more and more, leads to death and destitution, and I'm just not sure if I can do anything more. The school is already aware of their issues. My mother is a middle school teacher, so she's got some stories, but this one from this fall is quite scary. As a class, we're getting new assigned seats and waiting at the front of the classroom while the teacher reads out names and seats. A girl, who was pretty quiet but not exactly Osset in a status, stabbed a boy in the back with a pair of scissors completely unprovoked. She jabbed him deep enough to puncture a lung, and somehow, this kid didn't notice. It wasn't until 10-15 minutes later when he asked to use the restroom and another teacher saw the back of him soaked in blood. They figured out what happened and who did it. Police were called and she was taken to a children's facility. My mother stopped in at the end of the day to chat with the principal about the incident, and what the principal described was quite disturbing. She apparently sat there the entire time the police were talking to her about what she did and why she did it, and she had absolutely no remorse. She sat there and nodded. No tears. Gave no reason why she did it. Was told she would be going into a children's facility. Nothing. No reaction. Just sat there staring. This wasn't revenge for something this boy did. They weren't friends, and my mom said he's the sweetest thing who enjoys his small group of friends and POC registered sign mon. She did this completely randomly. When I was doing student teaching, one of the girls in there would constantly shove her hand down her pants and dig around. I had been trying to work with her on this by discouraging it. One day when I was telling her not to do it, she pulled her hand out and wiped it down my arm. The smell about made me sick. Not in my class, but a coworker of mine had a student, 3rd grade, who would draw really graphic pictures of him killing people. He would happily tell us that he's going to watch his dad murder his mom. Then he would kill his dad, and then kill himself. We brought up our concerns to our admin as well as mom. Everyone just treated it like a joke. Mom would laugh and say, "Oh, he tells me that too." But no guns until he's 18. Eventually and thankfully this kiddo ended up being hospitalized. I was an assistant. We had a rocket day where every student made mini rockets to be launched. They were in 5th grade and in the cafeteria, and I was walking around to help anyone who needed help. One little girl called me over from my class. I came up and asked what's up because everyone was almost done at that point, and she looked me straight, dead in the eye, and slowly licked the side of the rocket, like a seductive lick. I had never been more uncomfortable up to that point.